Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, April 3rd, 2020. Our pandemic continues, and our pandemic coverage continues, and our flubbing of every line that we make up as we go along continues, and that's good news. Everything par for the course so far. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Bill in Portland, Maine lets us all know that now that Jared Kushner has saved the world, and you ought to be thanking him by now. He just wants some appreciation, that's all. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, has nothing to talk about today. That's it, so it's all safe. And all you gotta do is give all your money to them and then kill yourself. Everything will be fine. So get ready for him, that's me, to hit the enthusiasms button nonstop for 2 hours. I would love to do that right now, but if I do that, it'll stop our fantastic music, and that's our flow into the show. You know, that's like 3 rhymes in a row. Holy mackerel. Something's happening today. I must have taken, somehow I accidentally took my kid's medication or something like that, and I'm in, hey. All right, well, I'm not going to rhyme the entire show. I don't think I can do that. Plenty to get to today. Let's see if we can make it coherent. If we start to at any point, let us know. And, wow, what a day. Yes, yesterday, Jared Kushner took the podium, and like nobody blinked, and we were all supposed to just go along with the idea that this idiot is now in charge and has planted something in my throat this morning. Okay, let's see. Interesting number of interesting articles and an interesting number of interesting takes on Kushner's appearance there yesterday. It's looking more and more every minute like this is just a giant hijacking ring. Of course, I've never let go of the notion that popped into my head the other day that what was going on here was that part of the delay in getting medical equipment to the states that needed it, in addition to being a political exercise, was also a personal exercise in finding ways to grift off of this. It's an enormous opportunity to steal money and everything else anything else that's not nailed down from the federal government if you are in charge of the federal government. And it's looking for all the world like that's the way it's working. We got to read some of these articles and catch up on exactly what's going on, but a lot of dismaying news out of yesterday's press conferences, and a lot of dismaying news really from everywhere. As a matter of fact, I brought up the other day, and I don't think I've fully updated the news on the aircraft carrier now anchored off Guam. Are they still off Guam? The USS Theodore Roosevelt, and which, as you know, has been stricken by an outbreak of the COVID-19 coronavirus disease. And I don't know if I brought us all up. I mean, you've all heard the news by now, but when I was reading the news on the show the other day, I had a feeling that our good friend Darwin Darko was going to be moved to chime in on this because the Navy is of particular interest for him, and I know it's appeared in a number of the stories that he's chosen to chime in on, and this one no different. So we thank him for coming out, and well, he didn't actually come here. We wouldn't let him in the house. Nobody's allowed to come in my house. It's a sealed chamber. No one can go in anyone's house these days. But he's got the background and update, and I guess there's a little bit more. I'll add. Why don't we start off with this submitted piece then early in the show, and give me a chance to, I don't know, do some of the things that I'll take a short nap. How about that? Darwin, please take it away. Please, and take it far away, would you? Thanks.
Hi there, Kagro. Hello, listeners. Been following this story for a couple of days. Originally planned on providing the military.com article. Then I came across this NBCnews.com article to follow up on a quick moving story about your military. To best illustrate the absurdity of this entire situation, I thought it'd be best to work backwards. Starting from the NBCNews.com article by Courtney Cube, written April 2nd. Headline: Navy expected to relieve captain who raised alarm about COVID-19 outbreak on aircraft carrier. The Navy is expected to announce it has relieved the captain who sounded the alarm about an outbreak of COVID-19 aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, according to 2 U.S. officials. Captain Brett Crozier, who commands the Roosevelt, an aircraft carrier with a crew of nearly 5,000, will be relieved of his command, but keep his rank and remain in the Navy. Crozier raised the alarm earlier this week that sailors on his ship need to be quarantined to stop the spread of the virus. His plea for assistance quickly made headlines. Crozier sent a letter to the Navy on Monday begging for help addressing the coronavirus outbreak aboard his ship, which was forced to dock in Guam last week. The ship leadership began testing everyone on board. By Wednesday, there were 93 positive test results and more than 1,000 people had departed the ship into isolation on Guam. In total, 2,700 people are expected to disembark the ship this week, with a smaller crew remaining to maintain the ship. The move is expected to be announced in a briefing by Acting Secretary of the Navy Thomas Modly Thursday evening. The official reason for Crozier's relief of duty is loss of trust and confidence, according to the officials who spoke to NBC News. So that's April 2nd. So what was the headlines that he made previously? For that, we turn to military.com and an article written by Gina Harkins, March 31st, only a couple of days ago, entitled, Sailors Do Not Need to Die. Carrier Captain Pleads for Help as Virus Cases Surge. The commanding officer of an aircraft carrier sidelining Guam says there are more than 100 positive cases of the illness caused by the coronavirus amongst his crew and is calling on the Navy. Leadership needs to do more to protect the lives of his sailors. Navy Captain Brett Crozier, commanding officer of the aircraft carrier Thomas Roosevelt, wrote a 4-page letter to his superiors, pleading with them to take actions to help stem the spread of COVID-19 cases on his ship. The San Francisco Chronicle obtained a copy of Crozier's letter and broke the story of his stunningly candid request that Navy leaders fix what he says is an ineffective strategy that will only slow the spread of the carrier, not to stop it. Quote, "We are not at war. Sailors do not need to die," the captain wrote. "If we do not act now, we are failing to properly take care of our most trusted asset, our sailors." Between 150 and 200 crew members on the carrier have tested positive for COVID-19, the Chronicle reported. The ship is pierside in Guam, but much of the crew remains on the ship. The number of COVID-19 cases has spiked in just 7 days since the Navy announced the first 3 positive cases aboard the warship. Crozier described the spread of the disease as ongoing and accelerating. It's impossible to practice social distancing measures on a ship, he added. The Navy must offload the entire crew so the sailors can be properly quarantined, which the captain acknowledges is an extraordinary measure. But the ship must be cleaned, he said. Keeping over 4,000 young men and women on board the TR is an unnecessary risk and breaks faith with those sailors entrusted to our care, Crozier wrote. He cited closed living quarters, food being prepared by people who've been exposed to the virus, and shared restrooms as reasons the ship needs to be emptied now. Navy officials said in a statement responding to the letter that leaders are moving quickly to take all necessary steps to ensure the health and safety of the crew. The ship's commanding officer advocated for housing more members of the crew in facilities that allow for better isolation, the statement reads. Navy leadership is pursuing options to address the concerns raised by the commanding officer. Recruiters last week raised similar alarms about the military's decision to continue shipping new recruits to boot camp during a global pandemic. Recruits in entry-level training also live in tight quarters, they warned, saying it was only a matter of time before COVID-19 illness spread wildly at one of the service's training camps. The Roosevelt isn't the only Navy ship with coronavirus cases on board. Fox News reported last week that there were 2 positive cases on the carrier Ronald Reagan, which is in port in Japan where it's based. There are also cases among crews assigned to the amphibious assault ship Boxer, guided missile destroyer Ralph Johnson, and littoral command ship Coronado. Defense Secretary Mark Esper directed the military to stop publicizing how many COVID-19 cases there are on each ship or in specific units or squadrons, citing operational security. The Navy's top leadership said last week that all members of the Carrier Roosevelt crew would be tested for COVID-19. The first cases emerged after the ship made a port call in Vietnam in early March, despite warnings that the virus was likely to sweep through the Asia-Pacific region. Sailors left the ship for receptions, sports competitions, and other events. When asked why leaders approved that move, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Michael Gilday said there were only 16 reported cases in Vietnam at the time. Those were well to the north of all isolated in Hanoi. Gilday told reporters recently that this was a very risk-informed decision, actually by the head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Phil Davidson, on whether or not we proceeded with that port visit. Navy officials did not immediately respond to questions about whether all of the crew members had been tested for COVID-19 as planned. While testing is important, Crozier wrote that it can't be a substitute for moving all crew members off the carrier. He noted that about a fifth of the first 33 sailors to test positive originally tested negative. They showed symptoms days after their initial test, he said. Testing has no direct influence on the spread of COVID-19 virus, Crozier wrote. It merely confirms the presence of the virus. This last piece from military.com, written by Gina Harkins. She can be found on Twitter at Gina A. Harkins. I'm Darwin Darko. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks, Darwin. It was okay. So that brings us up to today or so on this story. Although very interesting piece. First of all, interesting approach, I think, and a good choice to do things chronologically backwards and then fill in background afterwards. An interesting thing here. I don't know what's next for Captain Crozier, or whether he's Crozier. I guess we can find out, or at least attempt to find out, with some of the follow-up materials I have at the almost at the ready, one might say. But I'm curious, and I guess he stays in the Navy and he retains his rank, and that's a good thing. But I mean, obviously, losing command of an aircraft carrier group is not good for your career. Just sort of an amazing thing. Actually, it kind of brought to mind, I don't know why, everything is a movie reference to me, but my mind flashed back for some reason to that part of The Hunt for Red October, where the Russian Soviet sailors are brought up off of the submarine, or on rafts now, and are going to be, I guess, rescued by the American warships there. But then the captain pulls his ploy to make it look like the Red October sank. But before they do that, there's what looks like a battle erupting, and the sailors shout out, "The captain is fighting the Americans." I think they do it in Russian, and it's translated for us. So the line is never said, but it reminded me of this. But except this is our captain. Our own American captain is fighting the Americans, and now, of course, been relieved of command. So how do the sailors on board the ship feel about this? I imagine this would be rather terrible for morale. It won't make any difference in the Trump military. And I don't know. There's no reporting yet that Trump was behind the dismissal, the relief from command for Crozier. And it could be that, I mean, I don't really know naval doctrine. It might be that the captain's letter, or the leak of the captain's letter, put the Navy in an impossible position, and there was nothing else that they felt that they could do. And this would happen to any captain who did such a thing. And it may even have been the case that Crozier had in mind that was a distinct possibility, but he was going to risk it anyway because he actually cares for his crew. This is what you would want, of course, out of a naval commander. But, I could see where that would put you in a position to butt heads with the system. And, of course, with Trump sitting atop the system, he could certainly put a stop to it, and he didn't do that. So you got to believe it's going forward with his blessing. I wonder what kind of impact that'll have on a lot of people, military voters. It's said that the military is Trump says that the military is enthusiastically behind him politically, which, he's not really supposed to say, and it's kind of a dangerous situation, and also isn't likely true, or that there's a lot of variance, particularly among the enlisted ranks, as to whether or not they actually support him politically. But part of the answer is already out there. Part of it in written form, and part of it that might give us an answer as to how to pronounce the name. And here's the deal. I've got the written side of it here from Stars and Stripes. Actually, all of it is from Stars and Stripes, because I think the reporter who filed the piece is circulating this video as well. We'll give it all away, and then we'll listen. The headline in Stars and Stripes indicates that there's this video, which I've got here, showing the sailors sending off the ousted Roosevelt commander with cheers of his name. It appears that they are quite grateful for what he did. He ought to, I mean, honestly, he's got to have mixed feelings, but I hope people that he believes are telling him that he needs to be proud of what he did, and that this was the whole, this may be the end of his career, but this may have been the whole point of his career. He was put in command of the Roosevelt for this moment, and not every commander would have risked what he was willing to risk in order to protect the people who have been assigned to his protection. It's a very dramatic thing. So it doesn't surprise me that there would be these cheers. I've got the cheers, and let me see if I can cue it up on the big time show computer. Let's see, I'll have to pause it here so I can push it back and then pull up the volume on the thing. This, who's tweeting this? How does he pronounce his name? I don't know. This is Amichai Stein. Amichai, I'm guessing, because it looks like is he Israeli? Is that it? Correspondent at the Kann, Kann, diplomatic desk, and that's it's written in Hebrew. So yeah, there we go. Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation. How he got a hold of the video, I don't know, but I guess it's being, or he's tweeting it around. I think he must have just picked it up off of the Stars and Stripes. Yes, there it goes. It comes via Eric Slavin at Stars and Stripes. So let's back it up and turn up the sound and see if we can hear, and see if we can figure out how to pronounce the captain's name as well. All right, let's roll. It's about 53 seconds, too, just to prepare you. Now, this is, by the way, I mean, there's lots of wind in the video, and you can hear that distorting things. And the video, I mean, I'll include it in the roundup, but it's essentially of him descending what I guess is they still call the gangplank from a board ship and then off onto shore. The rest of the crew that's on board ship is doing that, and you can hear it after the wind gets out of the way, that, the old cheer. But I guess it's Crozier. So Captain Crozier, and then a clap. Really weak clapping. I can just do the real thing for you. But it doesn't sound quite as impressive when it's just one person sitting alone at home. So big cheers in social distancing, or as we're now calling it, physical distancing, and stay-at-home orders, not really as impressive. Let's roll the rest of it and see how long does that go on. Because he's almost off the gangplank and on shore. There's a car waiting for him and everything, but I guess that tells you all you need to know about how popular he is and was among the sailors on board who were in danger. He turns back and waves, nicely to everybody, and gets the salute first from, I guess, I don't know who's greeting him there, but other naval officers, and that's it. I mean, there's more, but he's packing up and throwing his pack in the car, and that's it. And there go the sailors in this case, headed back to duty, knowing that their ship is contaminated and there's nowhere for them to go. So, I don't know, pretty interesting just to be able to get a hold of that. Let's read about the write-up in this one, and let me turn the volume of this thing back down. Oh, not that easy to do, I guess. Okay, there we go. Now we have it out of the way. So, the Stars and Stripes piece on this, let's see. Chad Garland is credited with the written piece. A cheering and applauding crowd of sailors aboard the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt wished farewell to their captain, who the Navy the president, relieved of command after he raised concerns about the spreading coronavirus on his ship in a letter that was leaked to the media. And they really ought to be looking into how that got leaked. The San Francisco Chronicle got a hold of it. And I'm sure somebody thought, I don't know whether Crozier just said, to hell with it, I'll leak it, this is too important, or whether somebody else who got a hold of it, because he wrote privately, he wrote to the Naval Command. He went up the chain of command. I'm sure they didn't like it, and I'm sure they didn't appreciate, maybe they didn't even appreciate his tone. Maybe he didn't have a new tone. He wasn't somber and serious enough for them. Or maybe he was too somber and serious, and they didn't like that. But they somebody ended up handing the letter over to the San Francisco Chronicle, probably somebody who thought they were doing a good thing. And either at his direction when Captain Crozier just said, to hell with it, I know what it means for my career, but do it anyway. Or somebody was like, I know the Navy is not going to do anything with this, and I've had the good fortune to run across it. I'll help. I will fix the situation and leak the letter, and that will put public pressure on the Navy, and then they'll do the right thing. And eventually they, I guess, did the right thing in terms of reacting to this as an emergency. But then they capped it off with what appears to be, morally speaking anyway, the wrong thing, even if protocol demands it. But yeah, my guess is that by the time it happened, by the time that went down, Captain Crozier was ready for it and was awaiting his fate and resigned to it, I guess. All right. Hundreds were pictured in the gathering in the ship's hangar deck, and many chanted Captain Brett Crozier's name in multiple videos posted to social media, so there are several examples. That's how you send out one of the greatest captains you ever had, someone says in the video I didn't get, but maybe I should, if it's embedded anywhere in here, maybe we'll play that video. Then, using an acronym for greatest of all time, GOAT, right? The GOAT, or, well, it spells GOAT, which is very confusing for a lot of people. But okay, the GOAT, the man for the people. And I did see, was it Mike Stark joking? Maybe joking, I don't know, maybe not joking, last night, that if the Biden campaign doesn't immediately float the idea of Captain Crozier for vice president, it's political malpractice. Although, I guess you want to straighten out what is the military protocol in a situation like this before you dive in headlong. Trump would certainly do it, except he's the one that fired him in this case. Crozier was dismissed Thursday due to a loss of confidence in his ability to command. Sounds like he had a lot of ability. And for not using his chain of command to make service leaders aware of his concerns about the virus outbreak that had infected more than 100 sailors on the ship. Acting Navy Secretary Thomas Maudley said at the Pentagon. It's M-O-D-L-Y. I keep thinking, I'm always going to mistake it one day. Maybe I should just start calling him Thomas Moldy now, because why not? I don't know what I don't know who he addressed his letter to. That's never outlined in any of the stories. Maybe he went over somebody's head. I don't know. But my understanding from the first round of articles was that the letter was private, not sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. Anyway, another video shows the career naval officer walk to it says the brow of the ship. Now, I would have thought that was me, not a Navy person. Isn't that the bow? Is that a typo, or is that a term of art used on a naval craft, particularly an aircraft carrier, or is it just a typo? I don't know. What do I know? I was never in the Navy, right? He waves to the crowd, salutes, and waves again before turning and walking down the gangway, rather than the gangplank, I guess, right, alone to the pier. I'm getting a Navy education in this as well. Crozier's pained letter, which was leaked to San Francisco Chronicle and published Tuesday, created a little bit of panic on the ship, Maudley said. I think they knew what was going on. The letter had warned about the outbreak, or that the outbreak could kill sailors, saying that if we do not act now, we are failing to properly take care of our most trusted asset, our sailors. The ship, now docked in Guam, was on a scheduled deployment to the Pacific region before it was forced to divert to the island after several initial virus cases were reported aboard the ship last week. Crozier had asked in his letter to have almost the entire crew removed to slow the spread of the outbreak. The Navy has already removed some 1,000 sailors off the ship and was working to remove another 2,700 by Friday. That's today. Captain Daniel Keeler, the ship's executive officer, is serving as acting commander, while Captain Carlos Sardiello, from whom Crozier had assumed command of the aircraft carrier in November, was traveling to Guam to take the helm again, Maudley said. I guess that's the best possible option at this point. Presumably, he had a good run on the Roosevelt, and there are sailors there who remember him and will have trust in him. And so rather than, just dropping somebody from out of the sky, although who knows, maybe that was one of those situations where, they were glad to be rid of him, for all I know. Meanwhile, good suggestion there too. Although, I don't know enough about the protocols of either of these things, either the Navy or the, as Bob will speak, suggests here, the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Awards, but perhaps that would be a good fit for Captain Crozier. All right, so now we know what happens, at least to the command of the Roosevelt. There's a little bit more here, and as we approach our break, we'll see what we can fit in. Admiral Robert Burke, Vice Chief of Naval Operations, will conduct an investigation into the matter and the command climate of the Pacific Fleet to determine why there was a breakdown in the chain of command, Moldy Maudley said. Regarding Crozier, he had allowed the complexity of his challenge with the coronavirus breakout on the ship to overwhelm his ability to act professionally, Moldy said. I'm calling him Moldy from now on. It creates a panic and creates a perception that the Navy is not on the job. The government's not on the job, and that's just not true. It's actually quite correct, but I understand that the chain of command would have been insulted. I'm just not sure that he went outside it. Maybe it's obvious from the header of the letter. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netflix Radio. We'll finish up this article. There's not too much left to it. Let's see. There's the complaint from Moldy Maudley here, who said that Crozier somehow went outside the chain of command. That's entirely possible. It may have been a private letter, but perhaps he skipped the level just to make sure that... I don't know. I'm not sure what his thinking was. But it's there. Okay, in the hours since Crozier's dismissal was announced, the backlash online has been swift, with more than 55,000 people signing a Change.org petition calling for his reinstatement. I don't know how well that works in the face of military doctrine, but okay. On the Reddit social media site, memes began to pop up, and, you should probably execute military policy based on meme popularity. I don't think we're supposed to do that, but there's some good ones. But it began to pop up in the Navy channel, I guess there is one, expressing support for the captain and distrust of higher level officials. The one they chose to illustrate the point here, if you're familiar with memes, you probably know exactly which one I'm talking about. So my kids would know. I've never seen this one, but it's pretty obvious. It's a 3-panel cartoon, essentially, of somebody rescuing people from a burning building. And it looks like, I guess, there's 2 people trapped and you can only save one. And the faces are blotted out here, but one is got the text written over it. One, you have essentially the choice of saving either your career or your sailors. And Of course, he chose to save the sailors and run out of the burning building with them and let the career go up in smoke. And I guess that's what's happening. Well, maybe there's something that can be done about it. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll follow. I'm fascinated by it. Maybe we'll continue to. I hope we get to hear more about what actually happens. All right. Let's see. Other stories that we should chime in on. There are many. Let's see. How about heading into the weekend? Why don't we share this one just in terms of for our resources section, I guess, and remind people trying to survive the weekend, literally. This is probably good advice. This comes from NewJersey.com. I don't think it's a problem particular to New Jersey, but everyone should think about it. Headline here is, sorry, hanging out while 6 feet apart isn't coronavirus social distancing, expert says. And I guess this is the reason why they wanted to transition the language from social distancing to physical separation or something that's clearer. I mean, social distancing still has the social component in it. And so I guess people are taking it this way. Chris Ryan reports for NJNewJersey.com. The pictures have popped up on social media since social distancing became a necessity to battle the spread of coronavirus. Groups of neighborhood dads or moms spread out in a circle, drinking beer or wine in the street. A gaggle of teenagers sitting atop their parked cars, hanging out apart from each other. A pair of fishermen standing more than 6 feet apart in a shallow river. These precautions are all in the name of preventing the spread of the respiratory virus within New Jersey and the United States, but to practice true social distancing, those gatherings shouldn't happen at all, according to one health expert, and really probably all of them. But they only talk to this one. Dr. Maria Simonelli is exactly the expert you would pick to choose to talk to if you are particularizing your story for New Jersey, an Italian American. Right. So Maria Simonelli says she's the president of the New Jersey Academy of Family Physicians and director of the Centra State Family Medicine Residency Program, and said guidelines for people to remain 6 feet apart are meant only for those essential trips outside the home. Any extended, unnecessary contact with people, even 6 feet apart, violates the spirit of the precautions. If you're going to practice intense social distancing, it really means avoiding or limiting contact with people outside your family and really staying home most of the time unless you really need to go out, Simonelli said. And it's not, really need to go out in the teenager sense. It's the I need food or we're going to die sense. That's what stay-at-home orders are really all about. But, people fudge the rules, which is, I guess, probably part of the reason why they were initially reluctant to say, yeah, sure, wear masks, because people wouldn't follow the rules of which kind of masks to wear or know anything about how to don and doff them, as we learned from Greg. But you're staying home and listening to the show, so you're doing the right thing. Anyway, if you're going to practice intense social distancing, it really means staying at home. Simonelli said the 6 feet rule is for when people need to leave their homes for essential reasons, such as running to the store for groceries or going on a run or walk for the good of physical and mental health. Yeah, and I guess that's where the line started to blur. People are like, well, I'm only... First, of course, remember the orders. Well, no groups larger than XYZ people. At first, 250, I think they were saying in some of the cities, no gatherings over 250. Okay, 100. All right, 50, 25, 10, 5. Now, we're in groups smaller than 5 and we're 6 feet apart, etc. But maybe you don't really know what 6 feet looks like, or you're 6 feet apart for most of it, and then remember when they were saying, well, don't shake hands. You can fist bump or bump, touch elbows or whatever the hell else. Touch feet. People were doing. I don't know where they get all this stuff, but then you're not 6 feet apart. But people haven't really updated their practice just yet. Anyway, yes, maintaining a safe distance from other people while outside the home is essential, but the effect is lost when meeting up with non-family members for a longer period of time. Yes, having the 6 feet distance is certainly what's necessary, but doing that in a prolonged setting is not intense social distancing, she said. And right now, we kind of need to do that. We see the numbers of infections still continue to grow, and we probably continue to see that for some time, especially now that we're getting more testing done. Cases of the coronavirus in New Jersey, just to make it New Jersey specific for those interested, have continued to spike, though it's happened everywhere, jumping from 8,825 on Friday after Governor Phil Murphy announced 1,982 new positive tests. Simonelli hasn't been surprised by the continued climb of cases, even with social distancing practices put in place, but people still need to continue the practice to help that growth hit its peak. Well, I mean, that's not really what they mean, but to help it get to the downslope is what they're really talking about. We don't want to help it get to the peak, but it has to. Usually it takes a few weeks of good social distancing to really start seeing the term you're hearing everywhere, the flattening of the curve, she said, to start seeing the decrease and not more exponential growth of infected numbers. That's what we're going for here. So I guess as you plan your weekend activities, or maybe if your kids are planning such activities, or someone you know, perhaps you gently discourage that rather than participate in it. I know we're all hungry to reach out and see our friends, but it violates the spirit of what we're supposed to be trying to do here. All right, let's see. Direction. Well, let's go with this one. Los Angeles Times circulated a big one yesterday. Just another, I guess, one in a series of demonstrations of the Trump administration's lack of seriousness in preparing for a pandemic. We've heard about the disbanding of the National Security Council Pandemic Preparedness Group. We've heard about the number of reports that they've ignored. There were the intelligence community assessments of our readiness for a pandemic, which warned that the United States was woefully underprepared. There were reports of exercises, pandemic response exercises that were conducted in 2017, 18, 19 that were ignored. The manual that was left behind by the Obama administration, it was ignored. And then finally, the White House's own exercise and review of pandemic preparedness that concluded that we were underprepared and was ignored by the person who's supposed to count in the White House. Now we've got, and we also learned somewhere along the line about the shuttering of the slashing of the staff that the CDC maintains in China in order to monitor possible pandemic contagions coming out of the region. Well, more on that front. The Los Angeles Times reports Trump administration ended pandemic early warning program, specifically one that was designed to detect coronaviruses, which seems oddly specific. Emily Baumgartner and James Rainey reporting this piece 2 months before the novel coronavirus is thought to have begun its deadly advance in Wuhan, China. The Trump administration ended a $200 million pandemic early warning program aimed at training scientists in China and other countries to detect and respond to such a threat. Because why would we help anyone in the world, right? Screw them. The project, launched by the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, in 2009, identified 1,200 different viruses that had the potential to erupt into pandemics, including more than 160 novel coronaviruses. The initiative, called PREDICT, and it's in all caps, so it must stand for something. Maybe we'll find out later on, also trained and supported staff in 60 foreign laboratories, including, you'll never guess, the Wuhan lab that identified SARS-CoV-2, the new coronavirus that causes COVID-19. Fieldwork ceased when the funding ran out in September, and organizations that worked on the PREDICT program laid off dozens of scientists and analysts, said Peter Daszak, president of EcoHealth Alliance, a key player in the program. Well, they were just the first of the coronavirus layoffs, I guess. They caused the rest of them, but whatever. On Wednesday, USAID granted an emergency extension to the program. Wow, that ought to help. I guess it will, but Anyway, issuing $2.26 million over the next 6 months to send experts who will help foreign labs squelch the pandemic. But program leaders say the funding will do little to further the initiative's original mission. Look at the name. Our efforts were to predict this before it happens. That's what predict means, right? That's the part of the program that was exciting, and that's the part I'm worried about, Daszak says. It's absolutely critical that we don't drop the idea of a large-scale, proactive, predictive program that tries to catch pandemics before they happen. That would be the better time, I think, to catch them. Cutting a program that could in any way reduce the risk of things like COVID-19 happening again is, by any measure, short-sighted, he added. It is unclear whether another 5-year grant would have dulled the impact of the current pandemic, but the Trump administration has come under increased criticism for its past moves to downgrade global health security, including proposals to slash funding to science agencies and the elimination of the National Security Council's key global health post. A spokesman for USAID said PREDICT was, quote, just one component of USAID's global health security efforts and accounted for less than 20% of our global health security funding. He also said a new initiative to stop the spillover of viruses from animals to humans is scheduled to be awarded in August. So, I'm glad something's going forward. The PREDICT project, which operated on 2 5-year funding cycles that formally concluded last September, enrolled both epidemiologists and wildlife veterinarians to examine the types of interactions between animals and humans that researchers suspect led to the current outbreak of COVID-19. The pandemic didn't surprise us, unfortunately, said Jonna Mazet, executive director of the One Health Institute in the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, who served as the global director of PREDICT for a decade. The work had been going on for some time, and when the crisis hits, everybody stands up and takes notice and says, okay, we believe you. The PREDICT project launched in response to the 2005 H5N1 bird flu scare. Hey, remember that one? Gathered specimens from more than 10,000 bats and 2,000 other mammals in search of dangerous viruses. What a dangerous job. They detected about 1,200 viruses that could spread from wild animals to humans, signaling pandemic potential. More than 160 of them were novel coronaviruses, much like SARS-CoV-2. They also took blood samples from people in rural China, interesting, and learned that in living among wildlife, they had been exposed to coronaviruses, a clear sign that if those viruses spread easily among humans, they could take off. That raised the red flag, said Mazet. I would think so. Coronaviruses were jumping easily across species lines and were ones to watch for epidemics and pandemics, she said. The program also trained nearly 7,000 people across medical and agricultural sectors in 30 countries in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East to help them detect deadly new viruses on their own. One of the labs was the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the Chinese lab that quickly identified SARS-CoV-2, as it said. By the way, do I say that in like lingo speak, or do they say SARS-CoV-2? I don't know. But CO, the O is lowercase. It's coronavirus, COV. But do they say COV or do they say CoV-2? I don't know. The Wuhan lab received USAID funding for equipment, and PREDICT coordinators connected the scientists there with researchers in other countries in order to synchronize tracking of novel coronaviruses before SARS-CoV-2. The project's second funding cycle concluded on September 30th, 2019, less than 2 months before the new coronavirus probably began spreading. It was granted a $0 6-month extension. How do you like that for an extension? Through March 2020 to write up final reports, but do it on your own dime, I guess. All right. There's a bit more here, but I'm guessing that we got the point that we really needed to know. So one more instance in which the Trump administration, I guess, in their attempt at looking at a budget, said, oh, what the hell's this? This sounds like stupid egghead crap. Let's get rid of that and help pay for our tax cuts, except, haha, who cares whether you pay for your tax cuts or not? All right, let's see. Did we get to this? I don't know, because I can't tell you what the headline is because there's a pop-up ad in the way. Yes. No, we haven't gotten to this one, but we'll give it a shot. Karen sent us this one. I just tuned in a little while ago, so I don't know if you mentioned this. I didn't. But as much a theme as anything here. This from the Detroit Free Press, but I guess it's a USA Today wire piece. Trump hasn't ordered any ventilators from GM, despite saying he was using wartime powers to force production. He loves threatening to use the Defense Production Act, which he for some reason calls the P Act for short on on Twitter. And we all know that he loves to videotape P acts, so I'm not sure why he uses that, and it's really not. For Twitter, the P Act is actually longer than DPA, Defense Production Act. All right, let's take a look at this thing. What's happening here? Nearly a week after invoking his powers under Korean War-era law to compel General Motors to manufacture ventilators for coronavirus, President Donald Trump's administration has not formally ordered any of the machines, USA Today has learned. As governors warn of severe shortages of ventilators, Trump has been hesitant to use his wartime powers to force companies to ramp up production under the Defense Production Act, arguing that such an order amounts to a takeover of private industry. Yes, he keeps insisting that that's the case somehow. But Trump said Friday that was it last Friday? I don't know. I guess it must have been. It's pretty early for him. Is he even awake at this point? I don't think so. All right, where did we leave off? Trump said Friday he would use the act to require General Motors to make ventilators after what he described as a dispute with the company over supply and pricing. 3 administration officials, speaking on the condition of anonymity, told USA Today that the government is still exploring its options and had not yet placed an order under the Defense Production Act for any of the machines. So they're coming soon, et cetera, et cetera. I think at some point he promised 100,000. And then released from the strategic stockpile 10,000, 2,000 of which didn't work because they had forgotten to renew the maintenance contract on them. So we're doing really great here. Is there a lot more we want to gather from this? It's a much longer article, but I think we might kind of stop at this point and we'll throw that out there as a concept, and we can jump to another couple of stories. I was reminded in reading about the use of the Defense Production Act and the formal requests that I guess would arise under the act to push General Motors to actually begin production not having come through. This seems to be kind of an epidemic thing, no pun intended, inside the incompetent Trump administration. I saw a tweet and passed it on at some point earlier this morning. Where was this one? From Jenna Johnson, national political correspondent at the Washington Post, tweeting this morning, FEMA has received surprise directives from the White House, including to dispatch deliveries of medical equipment to states that had not even submitted formal requests. But based on which governor got Trump on the telephone. So that's the nugget that there are several, but that's the one that Jenna Johnson pulled out of the New York Times piece that is generating a lot of discussion on Twitter, entitled Kushner Puts Himself in Middle of White House's Chaotic Coronavirus Response. I've seen a lot of people pulling out different tidbits from this piece. Posted yesterday, Peter Baker, Maggie Haberman, Zolan Kano-Youngs, and Noah Weiland putting this together. And I guess, like I said, it's got a lot of attention. President Trump's son-in-law has become a central player, the subheader says, in the administration's effort to curb the pandemic, but critics say he's part of the problem. So that pullout quote from Jenna there really kind of caught my eye. Does everybody get what's going on here? Is at the same time that Trump and now Kushner, has taken the podium to say that, well, let's see, in Trump's words, the federal government isn't the shipping clerk. Everybody ought to be, all the states ought to be trying to get their own pandemic supplies, which is entirely backwards. Kushner, as part of his spiel from the podium yesterday, apparently said that for some reason that the people were thinking of the federal strategic stockpile in all the wrong ways, that the federal stockpile wasn't for use by states who needed help. It's the federal government stockpile. But of course, then people quickly pointed out that the mission statement from the webpage of the strategic stockpile said the exact opposite. In other words, this is another episode of How to Read a Trumpster comment. They got the purpose and mission of the stockpile completely backwards. I mean, the idea that it was somehow something that was, well, it would be okay if they believed that it belonged to the federal government, but everybody got the sense, the way Kushner put it, that people were literally thinking that Kushner and Trump really believe that the materials in the stockpile belong to them personally, that once again they have difficulty differentiating between government property and personality, and that the Constitution and the results of the election essentially award personal ownership of these things to dispose of as they see fit to Donald Trump and whichever of his stupid children-in-law he might decide to put in charge of these things. And of course, that's not the way it works. Nor is it the way it works to say, well, these belong to the federal government so that, well, if you catch coronavirus in Washington, D.C. or a federal building, we can help you. But if you catch the virus in a state, well, that's not what the federal stockpile is for. It's ridiculous. It's not like federal courts or federal prisons. It's meant to go to the assistance of the states if necessary, or even foreign entities if need be. Anyway, maybe we ought to be spending some time clawing our way through this New York Times piece before our break comes up. Peter T. Gaynor, the federal government's top emergency manager, was about to go on television last week to announce that he would use wartime production powers to ensure the manufacture of about 60,000 desperately needed coronavirus test kits. We need more than that, I think. With minutes until the camera went live, though, he still had to let the White House know. In person, the person he hurriedly called Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor. It's not so dumb. I mean, he is, but that idea to call him isn't. Who endorsed an announcement that surprised many officials. Among those unaware that Mr. Kushner had agreed to use the special powers, President Trump. Well, he Googled it, so it's okay. At one of the most perilous moments in modern American history, Mr. Kushner is trying in a disjointed White House to marshal the forces of government for the war his father-in-law says he is waging. A real estate developer with none of the medical expertise of a public health official, nor the mobilization experience of a general, Mr. Kushner has nonetheless become a key player in the response to the pandemic. Because of his unique status, he has made himself the point of contact for many agency officials who know that he can force action and issue decisions without going to the president, which is just wrong and not true. But then on the other hand, since, what's the point of going to the president? He's not going to do anything anyway. But if you are lucky enough to get through on the telephone, you can maybe get supplies for your state. And of course, whose calls will he take? He'll take Republican governor calls, and they don't have to fill out paperwork. Don't worry about it. I'll just send it to you, is essentially what's happening here. But while Mr. Kushner and his allies say that he has brought more order to the process, the government's response remains fragmented and behind the curve. Some officials said Mr. Kushner had mainly added another layer of confusion to that response, while taking credit for changes already in progress and failing to deliver on promised improvements. He promoted a nationwide screening website and a widespread network of drive-through testing sites. Neither materialized. He claimed to have helped narrow the rift between his father-in-law and General Motors in a presidential blow-up over ventilator production, one administration official said, but The White House is still struggling to procure enough ventilators and other medical equipment, and I guess part of it is because they never bothered to ask GM to do anything, as we found out from Karen's article. Perhaps most critical, neither Mr. Kushner nor anyone else can control a president who offers the public radically different messages depending on the day or even the hour, complicating the White House's effort to get ahead of the crisis. That was another nugget I saw somebody else tweet out. One moment, Mr. Trump is talking about reopening the country by Easter. The next, he's warning that there might be more than 100,000 deaths. In the afternoon, he threatens to quarantine tens of millions of people in the Northeast. Then in the evening, he backs down. In an interview, Mr. Kushner would not discuss the president's actions, but said he viewed himself as an enabler of government agencies to overcome obstacles. Sure. From the White House, you can move a lot faster, he said. I've put members of my team into a lot of components. What we've been able to do is get people very quick answers. So, sure, I mean, if you don't have to check with the president and you're allowed to make up whatever you want, I could do it too. But to some in the agencies, his team's arrival has only exacerbated an already dysfunctional situation. In recent days, administration officials said the FEMA agency, which traditionally coordinates the government's responses to disasters, has received surprise directives from the White House, including to dispatch deliveries of medical equipment to states that had not even submitted formal requests, based on which governor got Mr. Trump on the telephone. So if you have his cell phone number, his unsecure cell phone number, and you can get through and the president recognizes your name, oh yeah, it's one of our governor's peoples. I'll answer this one. I think it's a Republican. You get supplies. After the governors of Illinois and New Jersey called Mr. Trump last month, Mr. Kushner's team told FEMA to immediately deliver medical equipment to both states, even though the career officials were concerned that would redirect valuable medical necessities away from where they were most needed, such as the coronavirus hotspot of Washington State. Well, they're Democratic governors, so I guess there's something to that. Agency officials had to call the state's emergency managers to ask them to submit formal requests for the supplies that the White House had already promised. And, you know, people don't want to do their homework once they're told they're not going to be graded on it. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the Times article here. I see so many other smaller stories, equally important, but, well, for the sake of organization, we continue on. There is some kind of communications failure between FEMA and the White House, said Representative Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi, and chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. FEMA was brought in to the response to provide logistics support, and the White House should let them do their work. There's no reason for Jared or any other inexperienced person to be getting in the way of that. Administration officials anticipate that Kushner's role is likely to be a focus of the new Select Committee Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced on Thursday to investigate the administration's response to the coronavirus. Yes, take what you can get, I guess, but, they're not going to answer subpoenas. That's just what's going to happen. But okay, normally out of public view, Kushner made a rare appearance on camera on Thursday, joining his father-in-law's daily briefing on the virus to describe his own efforts. The president also instructed me to make sure that I break down every barrier needed to make sure that teams can succeed, Kushner said, adding a complaint that states had been imprecise in their estimates of needed supplies. And we learned the day before, and I revealed yesterday that I had found out the day before that it was Jared Kushner, supposedly, who was behind persuading Trump to question and then, I guess, publicly question and maybe deny New York's request for 30,000 additional ventilators, because he'd Googled some stuff and he was really smart now. Since jumping into the crisis in mid-March, Kushner has focused on coordinating a scattershot government effort, first to improve testing, where progress has been made, and then to obtain more medical equipment, which remains a major problem for hospitals. His team, and this is where another of the nuggets pulled out of the story has really become very interesting. His team organized an airlift of 22 scheduled flights of gloves, masks, gowns, and other medical supplies from China. The first touching down in New York on Sunday, right? Yay! That actually sounds like a great thing, right? Where's their medical equipment? We can't find any here in this country. China has got it. Okay, well, quite honestly, when you say, well, we're going to get it from China, that first reaction right now, under the circumstances, is, is it good stuff? But, afterward, look, that's what we have. That's what's available. They say it's good stuff. We don't know whether to believe their numbers or not. We heard about that one yesterday. But it seems like, they're plausibly able to claim things are somewhat under control there, even if the numbers are wrong. And, these gloves, they got 5 fingers on them, and this is a mask. Let's take the stuff. We were giving out Yankee Stadium rain ponchos, apparently, to nurses in New York. That's their gowns for their PPE. We'll take what we can get, right? So, okay, where is it? It's in China. That's a problem. All right, well, we got airplanes. Fly over there and get the damn stuff. That's, problem-solving, head-cracking stuff that you thought we need a businessman in the White House for, right? So far, so good. Mr. Kushner has embedded dozens of political appointees, and recruits from the private sector, in critical spots like FEMA. His, quote, impact team, as he calls it, has been nicknamed the Slim Suit Crowd for its sartorial preferences by khaki-wearing FEMA veterans. So the Slim Suit Crowd, Jared's style. Mr. Kushner's allies said that he had made progress in improving coordination, and that it was hardly surprising that agency bureaucrats bristle at outsiders suddenly arriving to push them to speed up or bypass their usual processes. That's plausible. Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, a Democrat who has both sought to work with Mr. Trump and at times sharply criticized his administration, praised Kushner last week. He's been extraordinarily helpful on all these situations, Cuomo said in a news briefing, certainly compared to the way Trump has been, quote-unquote, working. I'm sure that's true. Kushner has long been one of the most powerful players in Trump's West Wing, taking on a broad portfolio with mixed results. He is credited with helping to push through bipartisan criminal justice legislation that shortened sentences for some drug offenders and expanded job training for prisoners. But his much trumpeted bid to broker Middle East peace has gone nowhere. Can hardly blame him on that one. No one does. His influence has only grown during a power vacuum inside the West Wing. Trump abruptly fired Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House chief of staff, on March 6th, even as the coronavirus pandemic was growing. The president named Representative Mark Meadows, Republican of North Carolina, to replace him, but Meadows waited more than 3 weeks to resign his seat and only formally assumed his new post on Tuesday. Into that void stepped Kushner, who enlisted friends with glossy entrepreneurial backgrounds to help. That's the Slim Suit Crowd, including Adam S. Boehler, maybe Baylor, Boehler, Boehler, the head of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, a foreign aid agency. Mr. Baylor, we'll say Boehner, except Baylor, the founder of an in-home medical provider startup, and the former director of the Innovation Center at the federal government's Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, joined Brad Smith, who currently holds that job, and Nat Turner, a software entrepreneur. Turner once ran a snake breeding business out of his childhood bedroom before growing up to help found and later sell Flatiron Health, a technology company that works with cancer patients and oncologists. It's an interesting background. And I guess anybody could start that way. And now, if you were running a snake breeding business out of your childhood bedroom in an upper middle class neighborhood in suburban New Jersey, and then later went on to business school and worked your way up the ranks and became CEO of Flatiron Health, whatever that is, and sold it, that's one thing. But my guess is that it turns out that the snake breeding business run out of his childhood bedroom was run out of, let's say like a Fifth Avenue penthouse or something like that. And his dad gave him $100 million, and he started Flatiron Health without any background but did it as a quick startup with the idea of selling it in 5 years before they had to provide any coverage to anybody or introduce any products. That sounds a little bit more like the speed of the slim suit crowd. But anyway, in his efforts to help with the administration's response to the pandemic, he has involved Flatiron employees, of course, who have issued orders to health agencies stirring resentment, because who the F are you, according to a senior administration official involved in the meetings. The culture clash between public and private sectors has been jarring. The senior official described the Kushner team as a frat party that descended from a UFO and invaded the federal government. Wow. To government officials, the outsiders demonstrated a lax attitude to policy discussions, at one point using the website freeconferencecall.com, which lots of people use, but you're not supposed to use it to arrange high-level and supposedly highly secure government meetings. Others have used personal email accounts. That's supposed to make you lose. Personal email accounts in delicate policy exchanges. That has prompted criticism from watchdog groups who say such practices are not secure and violate federal laws intended to preserve such communications. And P.S. But her emails. Okay. There is no excuse for hiding information from the public that affects their lives in an extraordinary time, said Noah Bookbinder, the executive director of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, a watchdog group often critical of the Trump administration. The emergency situation has also led to questions about the merging of private and public interests. Some producers of the malaria drug chloroquine, right? Chloroquine, remember that one? Who know Mr. Kushner, have invoked his name with administration officials to press for a quicker means of production on the unproven coronavirus treatment promoted by Mr. Trump. That's the drink your fish tank stuff. After the president, at Mr. Kushner's urging, made a splashy announcement last month that Google was helping to build a national screening website to direct Americans to testing locations, it turned out there was no such national site anywhere close to being unveiled by Google. But, we heard about this, Oscar Health, a health insurance company founded in part by Mr. Kushner's younger brother, Joshua. Why? I don't know. The other guy did Flatiron Health, and he made a bundle, so I'll do Oscar Health and make a bundle. Well, Joshua Kushner did work on such a website at the government's request before dropping the project, according to The Atlantic. That is boring. I can't do it. Jared Kushner partly owned or controlled Oscar before joining the White House, and Joshua Kushner remains a major investor in the firm, as does Google's parent company. So there you go. It's Google. Who's working on it? Oscar Health. Never heard of them. Well, that's Google. They own part of it. Oh, I also own it. Oh, well. Trump wouldn't recognize that as a bad thing, but the rest of us do. Trump, according to two people familiar with the events, unleashed his fury at Mr. Kushner over the debacle related to the Google website the weekend after his announcement, a level of anger that the president's son-in-law has rarely endured and that seemed to knock him off balance briefly. I guess very briefly, because then they gave him the podium on national television yesterday. Kushner's allies insist Trump calmed down and moved on once Google issued a statement about the website. Weeks later, the website that was eventually developed by another firm owned by Google's parent company still operates in only 4 California counties. And I hate California. So, that's bad. Likewise, Mr. Kushner's efforts to open an array of drive-through testing sites has resulted in just 5 locations, a Rite Aid in Pennsylvania, 2 Walmarts and a Walgreens in the Chicago area, and a CVS in Massachusetts, each of which were set to run only 250 tests a day, according to 2 government officials. While senior FEMA officials, including Mr. Gaynor, the agency administrator, privately complained that Kushner's team is disrupting their operations, they described Kushner himself as helpful. He arrived at planning meetings in recent weeks prepared, he brought a pencil, with data sets that FEMA officials did not think to ask for, including models for expanding the emergency response. Some expressed relief that Kushner's arrival meant someone at the White House was finally in charge of operational activity. Kushner and his team from the White House Office of American Innovation, and that's a new one, have played an integral role by facilitating close coordination between the federal government and the private sector during this critical time, said somebody who's paid to say so. It's Lizzie Litzow, a FEMA spokeswoman. Last week, according to 2 officials involved in the situation, Kushner was told that FEMA was finding medical equipment to buy overseas, but could not get quick payment authority. Sounds right. Sounds problematic, too. Kushner, they said, canceled his meetings and went to FEMA headquarters, where he asked to have the official involved brought to him to explain the holdup. And I'm sure he wasn't busy. Kushner then enlisted Russell T. Vogt, V-O-U-G-H-T, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, remember him, and told Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, not to return to the White House until he figured it out, setting a noon deadline. And don't come back until you figured it out by noon, and then come back. By 11:30 a.m., according to the officials, Kushner was told it was resolved. I'd tell him it was resolved, too. Sure. Yeah, it's all fixed. Kushner early on agreed with his father-in-law that the news media was hyping the coronavirus to attack the president, according to several officials. Although people close to him deny that he failed to take the virus seriously at first, Kushner shares the president's view that governors are driving their residents into a panic by airing worst-case projections of medical needs. In conversations with advisors to the president, many of whom were stunned by the remark, Kushner has stressed what he considers his own abilities, saying he has figured out how to make the government effective. Despite the views of staff members who see Kushner as a novice at government, Kushner still views himself as a person who can fix things. I learned very early on that when you try to work around an existing government structure, it rarely works, Kushner said in the interview. You have to take the machinery that exists and empower it, rather than recreate it. So, some nice buzzwords there. But an interesting insight, and it has led to a lot of other analysis and speculation, I guess in some cases, about what's actually going on inside the White House and what they're actually doing there and who's making things work. One of the more concerning scenarios, and I haven't seen the article that outlines definitively that it's happening, but maybe if you've seen one, you could share one with me because I'd be interested in reading it. But I've seen a lot of people speculating on top of my own speculation, I guess, about the nature of the distribution of the medical equipment that Kushner's airlift is bringing in, right? So he scheduled the 22 or got a hold of the 22 flights to China, and so the federal government paid for these planes to go over and pick this material up in China and bring it back. Now I have seen people saying on Twitter, and I'm looking for the reporting backup on it, that what the plan is to bring this equipment in and then distribute it somehow to private contractor middlemen who then make it available on the open market for the states, which causes, of course, the states to bid against one another in order to get this limited amount of material. As opposed to, now that you've flown it over from China at government expense, shouldn't the federal government simply say, okay, we'll take it and then we'll give it to the states, not sell it to the states, and certainly not give it somehow to private middlemen in order for them to make a profit off of selling it on the open market to the states, having them bid against one another. But I haven't seen where they establish that just yet, but an awful lot of people are making that speculation. So I guess I'd like to see where that comes in. But if that turns out to be the case, I guess that helps explain how that Republican fundraiser, what was his name, who decided to quit his business after decades in, this particular line of work, and simply say, instead, I'm now in the business of being a middleman for all of this equipment. Free stuff is being brought in from China, and I don't even have to pay shipping, but then I get to turn around and charge the states for it. We were wondering, where does this guy who was a Republican political fundraiser last week and now has the largest global supply chain of COVID-19 medical equipment apparently at his disposal, how does he get a hold of these items that are impossible to get if you're a doctor working on the front lines. And I guess the answer is Jared Kushner is flying it over here from China for free. And I would love to know exactly how that works and under what authority that's supposed to happen. Yes, Mike Musson observing, truly true enough that Kushner was silent at the press conference as Trump, for the second time, I think, recommended that people use scarves instead of procedure masks because they were thick and so would probably block more virus. If only that were true of presidents, that the thicker they were, the better they were at preventing a virus outbreak. Then we'd really be in good shape, even if he's not. And we'd be happy that he wasn't. Anyway, but apparently scarf thickness has nothing to do with it. We don't have very good liquids that turn it into anything special. You still need a particular kind of mask. And no, scarves aren't a great idea for frontline medical personnel. All right, let's see. I'm going to, maybe I can use the break at some point to comb through the Twitter feed to try and find some of these other pieces of this puzzle. Let's see. The other, this was a really complicated tweet thread that I got a hold of here. That I guess at minimum, I will say I recommend to you to read over the weekend, because I said it's really complex. I don't know how to present it on the radio. Nick Carmody is the name of the tweeter here, Carmody, and he's one of those credentialist people. He lists his credentials afterwards in terms of the letters. Nick Carmody, JD, MS, Psych. So I guess a psychologist, master's in psychology, and a lawyer, JD, unless JD stands for something I don't know about. But he's put together this incredibly complex but very interesting thread, which is really a thread of his own past threads, but weaving together several threads on the subject of the outbreak and how the Trump administration is dealing with it into one overarching narrative. The problem is I don't know exactly how to present that overarching narrative on the radio. Yes, thank you, Mike. Mike Gula is the mask guy. You reminded me the name there. That's, I was going to say we all remember him, except we don't remember his name. Remember that jerk. But in order to indict him, you're going to need the name. But Nick Carmody, I'll give you a taste of what's going on here in this thread. Trump today, that would be yesterday, saying, this is back on March 27th. Trump today, I have a feeling New York won't need as many ventilators as doctors claim. You remember that's where the whole Kushner pushes Trump to tell Hannity that he doesn't think it's true thing comes from. Several weeks, though, from now, when thousands unnecessarily die, his prediction is that Trump will say, of course, nobody knew New York needed that many ventilators. What is that? I mean, we all know that's his M.O. Why, though, does Nick Carmody think that's an interesting thing to say, or why bother? Why is he any different than anybody else? Well, now he begins to lay things out here. Trump is sadistically reveling in political blue state personal retribution. That seems to make a certain amount of sense. It fits with what we've come to believe about him. And there's a whole thread that explains this. And it includes Donald Trump's December 28th, 2019 tweet in which he says, "So sad to see that New York City and state are falling apart. All they want to do is investigate to make me hate them even more than I should. Governor Cuomo has lost control and lost his mind. Very bad for the homeless and all." How the homeless comes into it, I have no idea, except he knows he can criticize New York as having homeless people because that's what his, supporters will believe. I mean, they do, but that's their view of New York City. It's got a lot of homeless people in it. Nick continues his tweet thread. Then his second tweet in the tweet thread of March 27th is his own first tweet of another tweet thread that he sent out December 29th, 2019, which says Trump's deep-seated sense of inadequacy was largely forged by not being accepted by the people whose acceptance Trump intensely sought. There was that backgrounder story about him kind of being laughed at among the New York real estate developer crowd as he tried to transition his father's rather homely, low-income housing and middle-income housing projects into a high-end, glitzy real estate operation in Manhattan, as opposed to regular person housing in the outer boroughs. So, Trump's presidency has centered around a platform that is the antithesis of the New York City ecosystem that shunned him. And that, as I say, introduces an entire sub-thread of his analysis. Well, this one is actually pretty short. And I guess it's interesting. Now I can see, having looked at the subthread, how did he begin to offer this December 29th, 2019 take? It was in response to a George Conway tweet who said, "I'd love for a mental health expert to explain that one." Which one is that one? It's Donald Trump's statement that he hates New York City and New York State. So can you explain that one to me, given that that's, where he's from and what he used to call his home? Although I guess by December 2019, that was when he was changing his permanent residence to Pervalago down in Florida. So interesting. And Nick, again, referencing one of his own prior pieces from April of 2019 entitled, "There is no method to Trump's madness. There are just consequences." Interesting. Consequences of his disorders. So, yeah, okay. Well, referencing your own work is okay. So then he goes on to, at that point, say, another thread is of interest to everyone. Here's a thread, he says, on Trump's psychopathology surrounding rejection that causes him to hate New York. Are we, let's see how long that is. I'm sort of curious. Yeah, well, I guess, there's an awful lot to it. So it's a sub-thread with its own sub-threads. But he continues on in the main thread here. Withholding ventilators from New York and the entire coronavirus debacle are the most recent examples of the dangerous, deadly consequences of Trump's disorders, in which, again, he now refers to a April 6th, 2019 tweet of his own, saying that the article, like so many before it, I don't know which one, continues to try to view and understand Trump through a lens of reason, logic, and strategy rather than pathology. There is no method to his madness, just consequences of his disorders. Nick continues with a reference to one of his own February 29th tweets. The coronavirus epidemic highlights the major problems in the political climate. Similar to climate change, the politicization and subsequent denial of a scientific, and here medical, issue threatens millions or even billions. And two, the effect of trickle-down pathology, which he goes on to explain in a sub-thread at that point. Another reference to one of his own tweets, this one from March 12th. This exposes the right's strategy to excuse or cover up Trump's incompetence. And he's got a whole methodology here. Step one, Trump and the right-wing echo chamber politicize a scientific or medical issue in order to martyrize Trump and demonize his political opponents. Step two, another one of his old tweets, simply because the data pierces Trump's delusional worldview, which has trickled down to and been rebroadcast by right-wing media authoritarians, whose career and ideological self-preservation has reached sociopathic levels. Step three, when the facts on the ground become so incompatible that the alternate reality is pierced, the right goes in deny, deflect, and redirect mode. Step 4, Trump and the right-wing echo chamber deny or gaslight any previous existence of Trump's or their lies and mockery, like Gates's gas mask, which is pictured here, of the virus, when the possibility of containment actually existed. Step 5, we are told here, here comes the music, Trump and the right-wing echo chamber deflect all accountability, Trump's or theirs, for the petulant, self-serving incompetence that contributed to the severity of the outbreak. Step 6, then Trump and the right-wing echo chamber redirect the focus of the virus by branding it the China virus, which by scapegoating others and foreigners, not only absolves them of any responsibility for their incompetence in allowing the virus to spread, but by branding it a China virus, there's actually benefit of, if not an incentive structure. Oh my, we'll continue later. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. I'm telling you, I'm getting deep down the rabbit hole of these interlocking threads, and I think maybe the thing to do, the commercial break made me stop, and I think maybe this is a good jumping off point. You should take a look at it for yourself and explore the threads and subthreads and see where they lead. And I don't think there's anything that will. So far, we haven't hit on anything that makes us say, "Aha! Now I totally understand everything." But it does weave together a lot of common threads that I think we've discussed here and might help make sense of the chaos in Trump's head, at least for our understanding of the chaos in Trump's head. But it did bring me to something just before the break. I noticed the discussion of of Trump's insistence on blaming China for the virus and trying to call it the Wuhan virus or the China virus, the Chinese virus, et cetera, et cetera. And we did notice him drop that from his rhetoric of late. And the first indication of why that might have happened was simply that he apparently had talked to Chinese President Xi Jinping on the phone. And, he's kind of a coward, and he wasn't going to stand up to him and yell at him on the phone, which is fine because that's counterproductive. But it was interesting to watch, Mr. Bluster back off of the Chinese virus thing once the Chinese president spoke with him about it. But I guess there's apparently another possibility out there, which is that, if indeed there is a scheme in place under which Jared Kushner is airlifting massive amounts of supplies from China to introduce, however he's introducing them, into the market here in the United States, then I guess that's the answer. That's why they have to back off of the China virus rhetoric, because the supply of medical equipment, which by some accounts it appears they appear ready to make a private killing in reselling, would be cut off. And so therefore it's not the China virus. I never called it that. I'm sure he'll be denying it at some point. And now we'll understand how this thing actually worked and why the Chinese virus rhetoric disappeared from the discussion. All right, I'll put that one aside for the moment. Let's see, something else breaking on Twitter, the New York Times. Oh, okay, it's actually not that breaking, it's older. So I guess update on CDC from yesterday, getting ready to tell everybody that we were going to be doing a mandatory mask wearing thing in public at some point. But I don't know. I guess that's an old tweet, and maybe we missed it and aren't entirely up to date on this. All right, there's a couple other stories. I'm going to have to just jump around a little bit and share with you. One, I think we ought to perhaps read over the weekend rather than do it here. Daily Beast's piece, Asuin Subasang, Justin Baragona, and Sam Stein teaming up on a piece probably important for us to take a look at. Trump literally laughed at how he can game the press with his, quote, new tone. You know, if you were among the many who watched in amazement as the traditional media awarded Trump brownie points and prizes for finally taking the coronavirus outbreak seriously the other day, only to say, well, of course, within hours, if not days, or rather days, if not hours, he's going to reverse course and go back to the old Trump. And he did. We haven't talked about the crazy-ass letter he sent back to Chuck Schumer yet either. Maybe we should do that one and read about that. But Schumer sent them a letter expressing various concerns. He sent back something that he apparently dictated to somebody who, I don't know, maybe like Hope Hicks or something. He dictates letters now that you would have hoped that there would be somebody in the White House who would say, okay, all well and good, but you want me to reword this, Mr. President? We can't send it this way. You sound like a moron. No, write it just like that. And apparently that one went out. Well, apparently it's all part of the game. And Daily Beast reports that he's literally, laughing out loud about, I can't believe that worked, essentially, that I fooled the press into giving me good reviews for my somber, serious tone the other day. And it was all just an act. So hilarious. We'll catch up on that one perhaps over the weekend. You can read it for yourself. It's important to point out that both Trump's company and Kushner's companies are seeking relief from their bank loans because their revenues are dropping precipitously as the economy closes down. And they are trying to work out plans under which they don't have to make loan payments or rent payments, etc. Of course, Kushner would be demanding that all of his tenants make their payments to him regardless. And also, I guess, regardless of prohibitions in the various bailout bills against spending government money on Trump's ventures, I imagine he's working on ways to vacuum up federal money for his properties as well. But so far, the reporting of the New York Times is that he's working with various private entities to which his Trump organization owes money, including Deutsche Bank, to work out a situation in which can we maybe pay you zero? Would that be okay? Here's another important story that we haven't gotten to yet. Axios reported this one just to keep an eye on what's going on online and in the campaign. There is a presidential election campaign going on despite the coronavirus thing, and Axios has, I think, an important entry in that saga. Biden campaign asks Trump campaign to pull video testing Twitter. Alexei McCammond is the writer on this piece for Axios. This is serious and worrisome. Joe Biden's campaign, I mean, this happens all the time. One campaign calls on the other one to pull their video. Oh, I think it's dishonest or it's misleading. And Trump is calling on Biden to withdraw a video too. But Biden was like, well, yeah, and I think rightly so. Well, this is accurately quoting you saying what you said about the coronavirus, that you said it was the Democrats' new hoax. And he says, I didn't say that, or it was out of context. I meant that they were saying, it was a stupid explanation. But this time, because the Biden campaign was rightly not complying with the Trump campaign's request that I want you to campaign this way rather than that way, they deliberately put together a video that they knew was misleading in order to put it out there and have the Biden campaign say, that's misleading, you should take that down. Oh, well, we're misleading, huh? But you're not misleading, and trying to set up this false equivalence. But watch how they did it. Joe Biden's campaign is calling on Trump's campaign to pull a wildly irresponsible video from Twitter that splices in sound to falsely depict Biden calling the coronavirus a hoax. And they're asking Twitter to remove the ad if the president's campaign won't. Trump campaign officials are using the video posted today. It wasn't today, but the other day. Let's say Wednesday. But they're trying to use this video to force Twitter to act, or, if they won't, to paint the company, Twitter, as biased after it declined to pull down a different video from a pro-Biden group that the president's team says deliberately used his own words out of context. The ad to which the Trump team objects says the president refused to take the virus threat seriously and includes audio of him saying, "This is their new hoax," which he did say. Trump campaign officials say that shouldn't be allowed because he was actually talking about Democrats politicizing the virus, not the reality of the virus itself. You see. Totally different. This is their new hoax. What's the hoax? The hoax is they're saying something about the virus. I'm not sure what it is. But not the virus itself. That's real. But what they're saying is a hoax. Somehow. All right. Well, this raises the stakes for the role of the social media companies in refereeing questions of free speech versus the thing we've all worried about, deep fakes, disinformation, and misinformation in the 2020 election. This is a wildly irresponsible tactic, they're saying, by the Trump campaign that attempts to draw a bizarre and false equivalence and is purposefully misleading voters. Biden campaign spokesman T.J. Ducklow, tells Axios in a statement, "Disinformation and deceptively manipulated media have no place in our public discourse and must not be tolerated in this campaign," Ducklow said. Twitter cannot allow their platform to be a mechanism to spread lies and fake media. And if the Trump campaign won't do the right thing, Twitter should remove the video immediately. The Trump campaign's communications director, Tim Murtaugh, told Axios, "Turnabout is fair play. If the Biden campaign objects to manipulated video, they should take theirs down." Of course, theirs isn't manipulated video. It's just what they say is, "Oh, well, I was really talking about something else." Like harkens back to the old Newt Gingrich thing. They should let, everyone hates Medicare and Medicaid. They should let it wither on the vine. You're going to let Medicare and Medicaid wither on the vine? No, I was talking actually about the Healthcare Financing Agency, HCFA, the agency that runs Medicare and Medicaid. We should let that wither on the vine. Now, if that withers on the vine, then so does Medicare and Medicaid. But never mind. I claim I was talking about something else. You're taking me out of context. Sure. So like this, it's not that I said the coronavirus is a hoax. It's that I think it's a hoax that Democrats say that I say it's a hoax. Aha! That's the real hoax. And so they say turnabout is fair play. A Trump campaign official who declined to speak on the record told Axios on Background that Twitter has so far effectively instituted a Biden protection rule, refusing to apply their manipulated media label to video and audio of President Trump that every independent fact checker says is false. Do they? The new video to which the Biden campaign is objecting forces the issue and makes Twitter decide whether to enforce rules fairly and equally or have a policy that's a partisan sham. So, long story short in that one, right? We think Biden is misleading people by taking us out of context, whether we really believe that or not. That's what we're going to say. But we can't get him to take down this video. So here's what we're going to do. Let's make our own totally fake video, not taking somebody out of context, but total fake, saying, I'll get some video and we'll put in some audio that makes it sound like Biden is calling coronavirus a hoax, since that's apparently so bothersome to Democrats, they'll be upset to see Biden saying that, and we'll put it out there. And then we can't do that. They'll cry foul and call on Twitter to take it down. Right. Well, we'll say, we'll take ours down if they take theirs down, or Twitter takes both down, but Twitter isn't going to do that because ours is a fake and theirs isn't. But that doesn't matter because we're just going to say that it's the same thing. We object to their video, they object to our video. Therefore, the two videos are equally valid. And if Twitter won't treat them the same and take both down, then we'll just accuse Twitter of bias, and then we'll start, a red state version of Twitter. That blah blah blah. They tried that 15 times already. This time, I guess they think that'll give it fuel to catch on. I don't think so. That's not going to launch, but I do think they're going to get away with this one. Very, what can I tell you? Evil genius. They're really good at doing these horrible things and making it work and getting away with it. All right, let's see. A couple of other things to consider before the weekend. Some tech stuff, since we moved on to the Twitter thing. 2 tweets I picked up on, which are very interesting. Let's see, this one I guess is the better transition piece. Chris Murphy, Senator of Connecticut, tweeting out, "This seems to be a very big story. Google apparently is refusing to allow candidates to criticize President Trump's coronavirus response." Have you noticed that? I have not, but he says so. "If true," the hedging, "this is a massive mistake that needs to be fixed ASAP. If not, just more reason to break up these information monopolies." He includes a tweet from Medium Buying. I guess media like Medium Buying. "Multiple Democratic and progressive strategists were rebuked when they tried to place Google ads criticizing the Trump administration's response to coronavirus." This is written up in protocol.com. I don't know what that is or whether it's a credible source or not, but it is credited to Emily Birnbaum, a March 31st piece, again saying Democrats say Google's COVID-19 ad ban is a gift to Donald Trump. To not allow political candidates to mention or discuss COVID-19, is something that has the potential to dramatically bolster Trump's and Republicans' chance of re-election. I'm curious what might be behind that and see if it's anywhere in this piece. There's an update here, right up at the top. 2 days after the publication of this story, Google revised its ad policies and said it would issue new guidance on political advertising about COVID-19. I don't know whether they have yet or not. The update was from yesterday, but they say they're revising it. Okay, so that means we can get away with reading a little bit less, perhaps, of the article, and then moving on to the next one. But the old story, anyway, was as coronavirus spread around the world in February, Google decided to ban most non-governmental advertising about the outbreak in an effort to defeat misinformation, fraud, and scams. It made some sense when it was, buy hand sanitizer ads, but I don't know about the political ones. But Democrats say the Google ban does something else. It allows the Trump administration to run ads promoting its response to the crisis while denying Democrats the chance to run ads criticizing it. Prominent Democratic PACs in recent days have funneled millions of dollars into television ads accusing Trump of mishandling the coronavirus crisis, but staffers of several Democratic nonprofits and digital ad firms realized this week that they would not be able to use Google's dominant ad tools to spread true information about President Trump's handling of the outbreak on YouTube and other Google platforms. The company allows only PSA-style ads from government agencies like CDC and trusted health bodies like the WHO. Multiple Democratic and progressive strategists were rebuked when they tried to place Google ads criticizing the Trump administration's response to coronavirus, officials within the firms told Protocol. Well, pretty interesting. At least we know that Google knows enough to say that things are being revised. Whether or not they really are being revised remains to be seen. Another tech-related story that I wanted to move on to, a tweet from Thomas Rid, R-I-D, from Johns Hopkins SAIS. So let's see. COVID-19, he says, has created and continues to create awe-inspiring intelligence collection opportunities. Zoom would be a big part of that intelligence bonanza. And we did see the other day operational security mistake by Boris Johnson publicizing his holding UK cabinet meetings while in self-isolation after having tested positive for COVID-19. And to prove that he was just like everybody else working from home, he tweeted out a screenshot of his computer monitor in one of the Zoom meetings, but of course neglected to obscure or blank out the Zoom usernames of the entire UK cabinet, which only creates, opportunities for hackers and Zoom bombers to drop in on such sensitive gatherings as the UK cabinet meetings. And there's been an awful lot in the news lately, smaller scale stories about what people are doing, but some of them are like particularly horrible things. Like people, of course, disrupting all sorts of meetings, including class, distance learning meetings of classes at colleges and universities and schools all over the country, including, some just, kids pranking things like dropping in on classes and playing audio that then takes over the audio feed and screws everything up, to actual racist attacks that are perpetrated by presumably outsiders to the entire classroom situation, but dropping in on classes and disrupting them with racist attacks against minority professors, which is disgusting above and beyond the problem it's creating with trying to cope with the virus. But anyway, Thomas Rid says there's intelligence issues at stake as well. The former director of the National Security Agency, Hayden, remember him, Mike Hayden, revealed in 2016 how the U.S. Air Force was hitting fiber optic cable heads during the invasion of Iraq, bombing them, in order to, as he put it, herd, like H-E-R-D, herd high-value signals into the sky where communications could be intercepted more easily, right? Disrupting the ability of the Iraqi government to communicate securely over the internet, so that they went instead to cellular communications, and radio communications, which could be intercepted. And, it's a good strategy. It's wise. COVID, though, is now herding high-value signals into Zoom and other apps, which were never necessarily really built for super secure use, I would guess. The virus is forcing an unprecedented number of leaders and managers to work from home across all sectors, in business and in government and everywhere. Sensitive meetings, of course, didn't stop. They moved to new platforms. The new, most important platform these days being Zoom. That makes Zoom and comparable services major intelligence collection targets, both for signals interception and for human infiltration. COVID-19 has made those targets of opportunity even more prized. Now, Zoom says it's end-to-end encrypted. In fact, Zoom is not end-to-end encrypted. This deceptive labeling means some, likely many, users consider the platform more secure than it is, like masks, right? Outstanding reporting offered up here from The Intercept. Zoom meetings aren't end-to-end encrypted, despite, what's their headline? Despite misleading marketing, Micah Lee and Yale Grauer report. We won't have a chance to read it aloud, but we'll continue with Thomas Rid's comments on the subject. He says, the problem of third parties openly sneaking into Zoom meetings is so pervasive that the FBI's Boston field office has warned of Zoom bombing in classrooms. Also, he says, reports from Security Culture. This from Vice.com that he included here. An article says Zoom is leaking people's emails and addresses and photos to strangers. So that's a bad news too, as well. Now, he adds, China has highly capable intelligence agencies with innovative tactics and signals intelligence and human intelligence collection. highly capable intelligence agencies have long targeted communications service providers in creative ways. And here he includes a Washington Post piece entitled "The CIA." Oh my goodness! They have a very creative headline here. The intelligence coup of the century. For decades, the CIA read the encrypted communications of allies and adversaries. Just sort of a historical document here. Nearly 1/3 of Zoom's employees, as it turns out, though, are in where? Anyone want to guess? The answer is China. Nearly 1/3 of Zoom's employees are in China. More than 700 of them. Yes, Zoom's product development team is located in China. And he provides sourcing for that. And then he notes, by the way, yes, so don't, they're spying, yes, but also don't do stupid things, like he includes the picture that Boris Johnson sent around. And important question here, he says, from Shiraz Maher, Maher, whose tweet he includes here. The question is, do you recommend that organizations stop using Zoom? And if so, what alternatives do you recommend? So Thomas says, important question. Most meetings and most users should be fine, I would think, but some government departments and some businesses should be significantly more cautious and move sensitive communications over to WhatsApp. Or better, he says, Signal. That is, if you don't have another choice and you have to use an openly available messaging platform from home. So, he later notes, outside of the thread, note Zoom's quick response to its recent trust and security crisis. That response is exemplary and very impressive work, and it is included here and linked. But there you go. Just something else to think about. So in preparation for your weekend and the work week ahead, remember, I guess the advice is, don't gather groups of people outside the home or inside the home for that matter, but sit 6 feet apart and consider that to be compliance with social distancing. And 2, give some thought to the vulnerability of communications you may be using for work, even though they may be necessary. And even if there are no good alternatives available to you, at the very least, perhaps be as careful as you can about what gets discussed in the online meeting rooms. And, common sense, hopefully, will protect you from spilling the wrong kind of beans in front of the wrong kind of people. Always a good idea. All right. Time to wrap up here, but other things that perhaps you might be interested in reading for yourself over the weekend. A Politico piece that captured a lot of attention this morning on Twitter with its headline, and in keeping with our new practices here during the coronavirus crisis. Well, this one, I guess I'll just read it as written. It's a SH sandwich, and we all know what that's supposed to stand for. I'm not censoring it this time. I'm telling you what's actually in the headline. That's supposed to be the rule. So it's that S word, sandwich. Republicans rage as Florida becomes a nightmare for Trump. How could it not? Right? But perhaps you'll want to read up on that one just to convince yourself that, of course, you saw and predicted the future correctly on that one. It's an amazing thing that Trump somehow thought that it would be good for his reelection to allow Florida, of all places, to just wing it on coronavirus. That's not going to work out very well. And another suggested item, this one, I believe, from our friend Twister Cat, who suggested a foreign affairs piece, also good for thinking, bigger think, let's say, over the weekend. The coronavirus could reshape the global order. How so? China again, is maneuvering for international leadership as the United States falters. I've seen a lot of reporting about the Chinese effort to be out front, offering assistance, aid, medical supplies, etc., around the world, not just to the United States, but in fact more pointedly to other countries around the world, and saying that in this particular moment where the United States is probably going to need to hold on to everything they can get because they've, screwed up their own coronavirus response so badly that they can't really afford to be sending equipment around the world and in fact need it from us. But basically coming out and sending doctors and sending test kits and sending equipment and saying, we're the ones who are there when you need us now, right? Where the U.S. used to be the country you'd look to for this sort of assistance, it's now coming from China. So there you have it. Very interesting possibility. A lot of things are going to be reordered and stood on their head by this coronavirus. And, if you're conspiracy minded and still think that the Chinese created the virus in the laboratory, but very carefully worked it out that everybody else would suffer from it, but not them, even though they appear to have suffered from it very greatly, with the idea of supplanting the United States as the world's caregiver. Well, it's pretty tenuous, but I guess it's a possibility. Could that be what's on tap with Justice Putnam's program, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next? I don't know. I would if I had spent more time reading his preview, but I can tell you this, it's worth your time. Where are you going anyway? You want a better perspective on some of these things?
From Daily
Stay
Co's
tuned.
Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
News from around the world, of course. Right here at home, we have more trouble with the Bundy family as they plan to use their platform, as dumb as it is, to encourage Idahoans to fight back against stay-at-home orders. Plus, some other interesting news about the infection and its apparent proclivity for ski resorts.